The newest volume of Classroom of the Elite is finally released, and my impression of it is that it was heartwarming and fun to read, but with a surprisingly intense prologue and ending. If you like a volume full of action and outsmarting, you probably wouldn't be fond of this volume, but if you are here for mystery and the characters, this volume is made for you. Volume 2 of the third-year arc story could be divided into three biggest parts, which are character development, romance development, and mystery development. So, let's take a look at it one by one. First, let's talk about the special exam. This new special exam is quite unique because the teacher didn't call it a special exam, but just a simple exam. A similar case happened with the sport festival, but whatever it's called, the fact that this exam could change the class point makes it no different than a special exam, even though the reward and penalty are not that high. Other than the name, there is pretty much nothing to talk about regarding this exam. This exam requires the students to behave properly and doesn't create trouble that could lead to point deduction, such as coming to school late, sleeping during classes, or inappropriate acts with the opposite sex. Simply speaking, this exam is just an upgraded version of their everyday life, but with stricter evaluation. While this exam is undeniably boring, I believe that this exam is just a symbol for the true theme of this volume, which is character development. Simply speaking, this volume was written as proof that the time had passed, and the characters that we know from the first volume are no longer the same as their first-year versions. As proof, Kinugasa intentionally creates a similar exam and a similar problem, but with different characters and a different solution. Let's start with Ayanokoji and his journey as the leader of his new class. It's easy to see how much Ayanokoji has changed, because from the gloomy loner from the first year, he is now a class leader who always becomes the center of attention. Since the last exam was an experimental exam to test Ayanokoji, this exam is the first exam where Ayanokoji really acts as the leader, and he did his job marvelously. Ayanokoji started his leadership by listening to his classmates' opinions about the exam. And like Sakayanagi, he let his classmates voice their opinion and only gave a conclusion at the very end. While this might be controversial to say, I feel like Ayanokoji uses a similar method that the Horita's class uses. He was open to suggestion and advice, but unlike Horita, he took action to try to know his classmates better by hanging out with them. Ayanokoji's classmates have also shown some improvement in their character, especially Yamamura and Hashimoto. We know Hashimoto well as a traitor, but in this volume he has been shown to cut his connection with Kaneda, and bet every single point that he has to fully support Ayanokoji. He tries to gain the trust of Ayanokoji and his classmates, but just like what Morishita said, it will be hard to clean his reputation. As for Yamamura, it's quite fascinating to see her offering her help to Ayanokoji. Although she needed a lot of help, she was finally able to speak her mind and muster courage to help her class. Ayanokoji made a comment that he intentionally avoided Yamamura, and Yamamura is the only one he never talked with ever since he transferred class, so that might be the reason why Yamamura chose to take the first step. There is also Morishita to talk about, but I don't really like how she is written in this volume. At first she appears as a unique character with an autistic personality that contributes a lot to comedy, but looking at her doing her antics again and again without any actual purpose starts to make me realize how annoying she actually is. However, that is a completely personal opinion, because I believe a lot of readers will like her characters more and more. On the other side, Horita's class other than Horita doesn't get much development for themselves, or actually, they didn't even get proper screen time. We got a few moments where they show their dissatisfaction toward Ayanokoji, but that's pretty much all of it. Most of the screen time was focused on Horita, and how she handled her job as class leader and also student council president. One thing that I found interesting is the fact that Horita is starting to act like her brother. When she handled the troublemaker freshmen as student council president, she just gave them the silent treatment, and let them keep fighting until they realized how childish they were in front of her, and shut their mouths due to embarrassment and nervousness. That scene was really similar to how Manabu silenced all the first-year students at the club introduction in the first volume. Even the way Horita is giving a punishment for both students is also the same as her brother, which is judging by their injury. Since the case that she handles is pretty much identical with Sudo's case back in the second volume, Horita must have learned a lot from it, which eventually led her to assume there was another person involved behind the scene. While Horikita definitely grows as a person and leader, I don't know how to feel when she starts walking the same path as her brother. Horikita made a clear statement that she will stop chasing her brother's shadow and walk her own path, but in this volume, the similarity between them creates a possibility that Horikita will turn into just another Manabu. However, the way Horikita asks advice from everyone around her is what makes her different from her brother. Manabu doesn't really consider anyone as his friend, but Horikita clearly made some pretty good friends in her school life. The way she trapped Ibuki and Kushida with her usual food trap is fun to read, and the way she tried hard to find a way to defeat Ayanokoji really showed her acceptance of Ayanokoji's transfer. Horikita's growing relationship with Kei is also another part of her growth. They hang out and go shopping together, which is something that Horikita in the first year would never do. Horikita's main purpose was to ask her about Ayanokoji, but if that was the only case, she could simply ask her through the phone. The fact that Horikita chose to spend time with Kei is proof that she values their relationship and wanted to respect it. She didn't even invite Kei to have dinner with them, because she must have thought that it would be awkward for her to be in the same room as Ibuki. Another thing that I found interesting about how Ayanokoji and Horikita managing their class is that both of them didn't want to maintain a status quo, which means they were hoping for a better change. Ayanokoji invites Kido for lunch, even though the rest of the class are avoiding him. On the other side, Horikita asks Coenji to listen to the class discussion, even though they have an agreement that Coenji will be free to do whatever he wants. Both of them try to get the outcast to contribute to the class, but it's clear that Horikita will have a bigger headache with her problem. However, she managed to buy Coenji cooperation with Private Point, but sadly she wouldn't be able to do it again since her Private Point is limited. It's worth waiting to see how Ayanokoji will bring Kido to cooperate. As for Horikita, she already found her way thanks to Sudo's support, and Horikita realizes that she will have a lot of friends to help her. As for Ryuen and Ichinose, they didn't get much screen time in this volume, but from the small hint that they left, they also realize how important it is to change and grow stronger as a class. Ryuen invited Tokido to discuss the exam, which surprised even Tokido himself. Ryuen joined hands with the opposition instead of shutting them down, and Ichinose also chose a similar choice as him. Ichinose realized her class needs to change, and that's why she welcomed the idea of inviting Kanzaki and Himeno to the gym club. It might not be really significant, but the class leaders had grown and changed for the past 2 years, and it all happened because they knew there was no guarantee they could win if they keep staying the same. That's why this volume is really satisfying to read, because this volume is the reminiscence of our journey, and we could finally start to see the end of it. Other than character development, romance and love become another big part of this volume. Starting from the small, the volume started with Yoshida admitting his feeling for Shiraishi, followed by Shimazaki, who also admitted that he has a crush on her. I don't know if the rumor about Shiraishi and Nishikawa liking each other could be counted, but I know Koji's class have quite complex romantic feelings inside them. There are also a few small love stories scattered throughout the entire volume, such as Anandera, who gets closer to Sudo, Mishima, who finally makes his move on Akiyama, Kaneda, who joins Hiyori's library club, and Watanabe, who is still figuring out how he should get close to Amikura. However, the main topic, and also the biggest surprise in this volume, is definitely how Ayanokoji finally develops a romantic feeling toward Hiyori. First, let's talk about Ayanokoji and his feelings, because they're important but also confusing for Ayanokoji's development. It all started with Yoshida talking with Ayanokoji about his feelings for Shiraishi. Their conversation made Ayanokoji wonder if he could actually feel the same as Yoshida, which is a genuine feeling and not a fabricated one. After that, Ayanokoji made up his mind to meet Hiyori, and that is where his feelings started to surface. Whether it's a coincidence or not, there was always a hindrance whenever Ayanokoji wanted to visit the library. It's either Hashimoto wanting to discuss special exam strategy, Yamamura offering her help, or Haruka who want to talk about Sakura. When he arrived at the library, Hiyori had already returned to the dorm, so Ayanokoji never got a chance to meet her until the last day of the exam. Thanks to the hindrance, Ayanokoji finally realizes how badly he wants to meet Hiyori. Ayanokoji starts to question why he stopped going to the library after he transferred classes. He also wonders why he is afraid Hiyori will hate him because he doesn't transfer to her class. When he finally meet Hiyori and see her smile again, all those worries suddenly gone, and Ayanokoji feels relieved that everything will keep being the same between them. While it's indeed sound out of character for Ayanokoji, the key to his sudden feeling is probably the time that they spent without seeing each other, and the hindrance that Ayanokoji needs to face to see her again. When Ayanokoji cannot see her for a while, he probably realizes something is missing inside him, but he is hesitant to meet her because he doesn't know how Hiyori will react when she sees him. Ayanokoji's conversation with Kaneda made it clear that while Ayanokoji is already prepared to be hated by Horita and the entire class, he genuinely doesn't want to be hated by Hiyori. Ayanokoji's feeling might be sudden, but it's not unreasonable at all. After the breakup with Kei, Ayanokoji has already learned a lot about the pattern of love. In fact, this volume shows that he managed to understand a few things that he wouldn't have been able to understand before. Perhaps because of that experience, he finally understands that he is actually falling in love with Hiyori and wants to make her happy, and that's why he gave her that poppy flower. However, this is not the first time we got a questionable monologue from Ayanokoji. It's not impossible if all his monologues are just an act to deceive himself to look like he is falling in love. As for why he did it, he probably did that to throw bait at Ichinose, so she would try to expel Hiyori out of jealousy. And knowing how crazy Ichinose could be, that kind of scenario is not impossible at all. If Hiyori is getting targeted by Ichinose, it could bring a lot of possible potential conflict between her and Ryuen, and if Hiyori gets targeted multiple times, it might be able to make her show her true potential and help Ryuen fight for their class. However, even if Ayanokoji fell in love for real, it's a bit naive for us to hope that he would pursue his happiness. Knowing Ayanokoji, it wouldn't be impossible if he decided to expel Hiyori to see if he could actually feel something from it. Just like what Hashimoto said, the first love is not that special, so Ayanokoji could just throw it away. After all, for Ayanokoji, his goal is what matters the most, and his taste of first love is not going to be enough to stop him. And let's just be honest, Ayanokoji giving up because of love is not something that we wanted to see. And the last thing that we need to talk about is the mysteries that start to become thicker to see through. Starting from the small ones, it seems that Chairman Sakayanagi already told Coenji about his father's bet with Atsuomi, and what Coenji has done so far is completely ignoring his father, and choose not to contribute. Coenji's actions suited his character, but judging by his hatred, it seems that at some point, he wouldn't be able to keep opposing his father. We know almost nothing about Coenji, but it looks like his internal conflict between his principal and his father's order is bothering him quite a lot. It's impossible for Coenji to remain silent until graduation, but if he didn't act fast, his class could lose their position to the point it would be impossible even for him to save, because Ayanokoji already planted a traitor inside the class. While it's not explicitly shown, Ayanokoji manages to gain info from Horikita's class from an unknown source. He could know what exactly Chabashira said to the class, and he also knows that Horikita already figured out the exam, and it's obvious that the ones who could know that information are just students from Horikita's class. So far Kushida is the strongest candidate to become Ayanokoji's spy, and Kushida's actions in this volume are also raising an eyebrow. She openly asked Horikita about her strategy on the special exam, and asked her to let her know if she thought of anything. Even Horikita found it strange that Kushida was offering her help, but Kushida managed to let it slip from her mind. While the chance is high for Kushida to become Ayanokoji's spy, it will be better if we keep open for more possibility, because who knows what kind of twist will appear in the future. Speaking about spies, Ayanokoji finally gets suspicious of Shiraishi. He asked her if she was already watching over him even before his transfer, but Shiraishi's answer only made him more suspicious. At the end, Ayanokoji asks Yamamura to watch over Shiraishi. While Shiraishi is a new character that was only introduced in the previous volume, her presence is quite impactful because she immediately becomes part of the story. At first she was important because of her mysterious connection with Sakayanagi, but now her connection seems to root even deeper. This volume reveals that Shiraishi has some kind of connection with Tsubasa Nanase, because it turns out they were raised by the same person called Mr. Shirogane. Shiraishi was sent to ANHS to observe Ayanokoji, and she is not alone in her mission. Even though it doesn't seem like Tsubasa knew her before coming to ANHS, she knew about Shiraishi, but didn't know about Shiraishi's ally's identity. Shiroishi meeting with Tsubasa explains a lot of things, but also brings a lot of new mysteries. If we want to draw the simplest conclusion, it seems Shiroishi was sent to ANHS just to observe Ayanokoji under Tsukishiro's order. Under Atsuomi's order, Tsukishiro spread the information about Ayanokoji's enrollment to ANHS, so they sent a few students to observe him inside the school. Atsuomi's intention is easy to predict, which is to gain allies or more investors by letting them see with their own eyes how Ayanokoji breaks the ANHS system, and Mr. Shirogane is one of that potential allies. However, that conclusion sounds too easy to predict, and it also doesn't explain why they need to send multiple students just to observe Ayanokoji, so let's just save the complicated part for another video, and let's focus on what Tsubasa is trying to do. Tsubasa said she wants to expel Ayanokoji at the unexpected timing. However, in her monologue she said she genuinely wants to save Ayanokoji, so expelling Ayanokoji must be her way to save him from the worst possible outcome. She probably wants Ayanokoji to stop following his father's script, because graduating from ANHS with his current mentality will only result in Atsuomi's satisfaction, and for that purpose, she needs help from Shiroishi's partner. If we are talking about Shiroishi Li's identity, the first one who came to my mind was Utomiya. In her conversation with Tsubasa, Shiroishi knew about Ayanokoji's current location at the gym, and the only people who seem to know about it are just Utomiya and Miss Akiyama, who directly met Ayanokoji at the gym. Utomiya's quote from the third-year website also amplifies this possibility, because he said that they already made a promise to not contact each other. This whole new connection between Tsubasa, Shiroishi, and maybe Utomiya is honestly very confusing and complicated. We no longer know which one stands at which side, because everyone suddenly becomes gray and could be sided with anyone. It's suddenly no longer a battle between Atsuomi and Prime Minister Kejima, but could potentially spread into a lot of political factions or even big names in the country. And let's not forget about the new student that Utomiya brings to the gym. Tsubasa already said there is a new student that caught her attention, and this new student keeps attracting attention by running on the treadmill for several minutes with the speed of 20 km/h. She is also probably the one who injured the first-year student and caught Horita and Tsubasa's attention. Her physical ability is most likely at the level of a White Room student, but since this new girl has a connection with Utomiya, and Utomiya probably has a connection with Shiroishi, there is a chance she was also sent by Mr. Shirogane for an unknown mission. With Tsubasa added to their group, even Ayanokoji would find it hard to know exactly what their intention is. Their conflict will be very interesting to see, because if you remember Ayanokoji's order to Yamamura, it's highly possible that Yamamura is there listening to their conversation. Even if she cannot eavesdrop on their conversation, she still could take a picture and show it to Ayanokoji. When Ayanokoji learns about it, his dynamic with Shiroishi will no longer be the same, and let's see if Shiroishi would find the difference in Ayanokoji's voice or not. And now let's move to the last mystery, which is Horita's final conversation with the long-awaited Ishigami. Ishigami asks Horita about her intention of spying on Ichika, but he manages to cleverly lead the conversation the way he wants and finally push Horita to confront Tsubasa. Ishigami's motive isn't clear, but so far we are led to believe that Ishigami is working under Atsuomi's order, but this scene somehow makes his character more gray, just like everyone else. Since Tsubasa wants to help Ayanokoji, sending Horita toward her to learn about Ayanokoji could probably result in Horita helping Tsubasa in her plan. However, Tsubasa's plan was the opposite of what Atsuomi wanted, so the reason for Ishigami's action is not something that I would expect from Atsuomi underling. Maybe he has another plan in mind, but let's just open another possibility that Ishigami is probably a traitor that Atsuomi thought he could believe. Since this volume is divided between Horita and Ayanokoji's POV, we should get used to a lot of scenes that don't seem connected with each other. However, the last scene of this volume is far from being related to the present, because suddenly we got a monologue from Horita in the future. This kind of writing had been shown a few times before, so this is not exactly a new thing, but the content of this monologue is a cliffhanger that made this volume heavier than what it was supposed to be. The future Horita said that she finally learned about Ayanokoji's past, about the White Room, and about the cruel fate that was waiting for Ayanokoji at the end of his journey. This monologue alone is a big spoiler that tells us Ayanokoji wouldn't end with a happy ending, but if we look at it again, there is no indication of when this future Horita came from. It could be 10 years in the future, or maybe just a few months after her meeting with Ishigami. However, the future Horikita said that her meeting with Ishigami was planned by someone, but it's also a turning point that changed her life dramatically. While I don't want to consider this possibility, it seems like Horikita will learn about Ayanokoji's past while she is still in high school, but since Ayanokoji graduates with an unhappy ending, Horikita decides to enter politics so she can meet Ayanokoji again. This is aligned with the volume 12.5 side story where the narrator said that Horikita is destined to meet Atsuomi again, and choosing politics as a career is definitely a life-changing decision. However, at this point, everything could happen and also not happen to Ayanokoji, even if it's already written from the future. The future Horikita monologue is mostly ambiguous, so there is a lot of room to improvise. However, that monologue creates a very heavy atmosphere that will be carried to the future volume. Whether you like it or not, the Classroom of the Elite series will never feel the same again.